study. Let me switch to. I'm already technical difficulties.
Told you about it.
For those of you who don't know who I am Nelson Tereso. I head up the Office of Community Development. I am the Director of Economic and Community Development for the town of Enfield. Tonight on the agenda, we are going to discuss the Enfield Square Mall study area, which encompasses 15 intersections that make up the perimeter of the mall area. That area consists of Hazard Ave from Phoenix Ave at the intersection of Hazard Ave heading east all the way to Palumba Drive, then heading north on Palumba Drive to Elm Street, and then heading west back to the 91 on and off ramps. Within that study area encompasses 15 intersections that are going to be assessed in order to improve operating and maximizing the capacity for the 190-220 corridor based on a market study that was performed to assess a potential full build-out of the mall area. This is not a master plan for the mall. While the owner of the mall, Namdar Realty, has been involved in as a project stakeholder for some input, they are not a sponsor or facilitating this study. So this is not a master plan. This is a traffic impact study to assess the future build-out of the mall and also a no-build alternative for the mall area. There was a existing condition traffic assessment that's already been conducted in 2021 by the CDM Smith team, which were engaged by CROG. When I'll go over the players in a minute, but CDM Smith did perform a existing traffic assessment of all 50 intersections to determine the existing traffic conditions as they currently exist today. Today being 2021 when the traffic assessment was conducted. A visual preference survey was also conducted earlier on this year in order to get the public's feedback on what they felt were the appropriate mixes of uses that could go inside of the mall. We had actually a very good positive feedback on that. We had actually well over, I think, 1,000 people who conducted the visual preference survey. A detailed market analysis and trend study was performed about a year ago to assess what the market demand is for the mall. Based on it, we did interviews with real estate people, developers, and we also did a nationwide market study of other underutilized malls, and we assessed potential what they had performed and how they redeveloped their malls, and seeing what can be done the same for this mall. And ultimately, tonight's meeting is to discuss access management. The mall currently has 4 entrances to the mall. 2 on two on Elm Street, 1 on Freshwater Boulevard, and 1 on Hazard Ave. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to present 4 options which our consultant has developed in regards to a modified access plan. We have not assessed any traffic analysis on any of those access options, any future traffic analysis. The goal will be ultimately to pick 2 preferred access options to be assessed as part of the future no build and future build scenario. Next slide, please. So tonight, the project team in front of you, we have from the Capital Regional Council of Governments who sponsored this study. We have Caitlin Palmer and Chris Hinchy.
Yep, that's how you say it.
Myself, and Lori Whitten, who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. And from the CDM Smith team, who is developing this traffic study, we have Becca Hall, the project manager, Carl, and Ted Stevens. Carl, how do you pronounce your name?
Dusler.
Dusler. Little background. So, traffic impact study, what does that entail? It's basically a study to review the potential impacts of a proposed development on the local roadway network. So like I mentioned earlier, we have developed based on a market study, potential use of full build out, which we'll discuss in more detail today. We're basically going to assess based on the traffic generated based on that future build out, what the conditions are in the year 2045 for the mall area. Why is a traffic study here? Well, it was identified by CROG as part of the infield traffic circulation improvement study surrounding the Infield Square Mall area. So CROG sponsored this study, and it's going to provide the owner or future developer of the infield property and the town with potential alternatives for redevelopment, but more importantly, it's going to assess the improvements to the local roadway network which would be required. So we're going to, at the end of this study, develop a mitigation strategy on what needs to be mitigated as a result of the full build-out scenario. That traffic has to be approved by the Connecticut Department of Transportation, who is also a project stakeholder in this, and they are going to be reviewing all of the traffic assessment that's going to be performed as part of the study. It's also going to help them down the road as part of any future improvements that need to be done to the 190-220 corridor. So with that being said, I am going to now kick things over to the project manager over at CDM Smith, Becca Hall.
Perfect. Thanks, Nelson, and thank you all for joining us. If at any time during this presentation you can't hear me, please do let me know. And for everybody who's joining us through YouTube, you will not be able to ask questions back and forth, but in the bottom left-hand corner of all of the slides, you'll see a cell phone number that you can text questions or comments to, and we will respond to those after we respond to the comments in person at the end of this presentation. As Nelson mentioned, I am Becca Hall. I'm the project manager with CDM Smith. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm a traffic operations engineer as well as a road safety professional. With me today, I have Carl Dusler, who is another traffic engineer, as well as Ted Stevens, who is a transportation planner. We're based out of East Hartford, Connecticut. So we're very local to this corridor. We drive it, we shop it, we know this area very well. So as Nelson has already gone over, you can see the study area. I'm going to move back so I can point out different pieces to you. So highlighted in orange is the general project area. It's about a half-mile buffer around the Enfield Mall. Here in black and on all the boards around you, you can see the Enfield Mall itself. And then these little yellow dots, those represent the 15 intersections that Nelson was speaking to. So while they are concentrated around the mall, there are other intersections on Paloma as well as Freshwater that we are taking a look at to see how they would be impacted by any redevelopment at the mall site. So for the existing conditions analysis that we completed, the first step for us was to complete a site visit. We completed this in October of 21. So schools were in session, it was your standard peak hours. We completed this work in the weekday morning as well as the afternoon peak hours. And we also came out there, even though it's not on the screen, we came out and looked at the traffic on the Saturday midday as well. When we were completing this site visit, we were taking a look at vehicular operations as well as pedestrian accommodations, any cyclists that are out there. We are identifying any needs that we saw, any issues that we saw, any opportunities that there could be for that area. So I'm going to go through some of what we saw out there now. So on the screen that you see here is a footpath. It's along Freshwater Boulevard. So what this tells us as engineers and planners is people want to walk here. You can see the worn path and there's no sidewalk. So that's something we want to look at as we're looking at this development. It's not just looking at how this development will serve motor vehicles, but it's looking at how this development will serve all users. So pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, taking into consideration all of their needs. The other pieces that we wanted to highlight, so at the intersection of Hazard Ave at Phoenix Ave and a lot of the intersections along this corridor, there are significant left turn movements that are being made. So there's a lot of left turns. You don't always have that protected arrow, and there's a lot of near misses that occur. There was actually a couple while we were out there, and on my way here today, I actually saw somebody trapped in the middle of the intersection. So that's something we'll take a look at as we move further into some of our recommendations. There's the narrow sidewalk that's under the bridge on Route 220. We noticed that this area in particular has a lot of people of all ages, some really young cyclists that were out there riding their bike. And so taking a look at how narrow that is and what type of accommodations there are. And then there are also non-compliant accessible ramps and missing crosswalks. So what does a non-compliant ramp mean? It means that there's no of those bumpy surfaces. So you see the orange or the red or the yellow blocks with the bumpy surfaces. That lets visually impaired people know they're going to be entering into an intersection, or the ramps are too steep. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking for non-compliance. The next part of the existing conditions analysis was to complete the crash history. Connecticut has a very robust crash data repository that's hosted by the University of Connecticut. So we took a look at the last 4 years of crash data. So that's 2017 through 2020. So during those 4 years in our entire study area that you saw earlier, there were 471 crashes. Of those, 45% were rear end and 35% were angle. That's pretty standard. Types of crashes being the larger with a congested and signalized network. However, having a large number of angle type as well as side swipe crashes, what that tells us is we need to look closer at how those left turn phases are working and what type of improvements there may be potentially for the future. And then in those 471 crashes, 6 of them were cyclists. There were 2 pedestrian crashes. There was 1 fatality and 3 serious injuries. And we'll get in a little more detail on those statistics on this next slide. So this next slide here, again, I'll go back so I can point it out to you. This looks at the severity of the different crash types. So there was 1 fatality up on 220 at the intersection with St. Thomas Street, and then there were 3 serious injury crashes that occurred, 2 on 190 and 1 on 220. And then the pedestrian and bicycle crashes are largely concentrated on 220 on Elm Street in that area I talked about with the overpass with 91, and that's consistent with where we saw the predominant pedestrian and cyclist activity on the corridor. So this next crash graphic, what this shows you is the colored dots are the number of crashes. So the green are the lower levels and the red are the higher number of crashes. And then it might be harder to see, but this presentation will be available on the website afterwards. There are numbers that are associated with each of these. This number represents the crash rate. So what the crash rate takes into consideration is the number of vehicles that travel through that corridor. So in a location such as this Cranbrook and Paloma Drive intersection, where there's a green dot, so that has a low number of crashes, the crash rate's actually 1.14. It's the second highest crash rate in the study area, and that's because of the low volume. So the volume's so much lower that this number of crashes is statistically significant compared to the rest of the locations in the study area. The highest crash rate occurs at the 91, the southbound on and off ramps. So that crash rate is 1.23, but that also has the large red dot. And that's because there's a lot of crashes, but also a lot of volume to give you that high crash rate. So as part of existing conditions, you heard we talked about, we went out and did our site observations. Also in 2021, what we did in May, right before school was out for the season, is we conducted traffic counts. So we conducted turning movement traffic counts at all of these study area intersections during the weekday morning, which is 7 to 9 a.m., the weekday afternoon, which is, we did 3 to 6 p.m., and then the Saturday midday, which was 11 to 2 p.m., to take a look at how much volume is utilizing each intersection and which way they are turning. Along with counting vehicular volume, we counted pedestrians and bicyclists that utilize the corridor and make these same movements. And what we found is that the Route 220 corridor has 7 times more pedestrians and 17 times more cyclists than the Route 190 corridor. So what we're seeing is, just like what we saw in our site observations, there are a lot of pedestrians and cyclists out there. And that's about 300 total during the peak hours is what we witnessed. And so taking those volumes and projecting them. So Nelson mentioned we're looking at the existing conditions, but then the next step is looking at no build. So in the future, if no other development was to come to the mall, how would these intersections operate? So you still have your standard traffic growth, you have other developments that have been approved like the AAA expansion, but that aren't occupied or constructed yet. And we add those to the background network, how would these intersections operate in 2045? The Connecticut Department of Transportation provided us with these projected volumes. So this is what we'll consider our base year. So we'll be comparing any future growth back to this no build year. So if nothing were to occur, it was just your standard growth, this is what the projected traffic volumes would be. The next step is after we have these traffic volumes, we complete capacity analysis. So what this analysis tells us is how these different intersections are going, or do rather, operate, both in 2021 as well in 2045. So this traffic operations analysis was completed using Synchro version 11. That's industry standard software. It's a macro simulation program. It tells you the delay at each intersection, so in seconds. So do you spend 10 seconds, 60 seconds waiting for your traffic signal to turn green for you to go through it? It tells you a level of service, which is a nice report card, A through F, and it also tells you your volume to capacity ratio. So how much each intersection can handle and where you are now, and then it tells you what the queues look like. So your average and then your maximum queue along each of the approaches. So what this helps look at is for driveway placement in the future, it helps you look at, do you need to lengthen your turn lanes, or maybe, can you shorten some of your turn lanes and give some of that space back to the overall network. So we'll look at what those level of service metrics have. So level of service is associated with delay. So level of service for a signalized intersection and an unsignalized intersection. So while there are 15 intersections in our network, 14 are signalized, 1 is unsignalized. The one unsignalized intersection is that stop controlled intersection I talked about earlier with Paloma and Cranbrook. And so there's different characteristics and different levels of delay. Overall, A and B are a good level of service. C or D are like your typical, urban peak hour operations. And then E or F is really where you're starting to look at improvements. So I think the letters are probably really hard for you to see. A good way to think about it is A and B are green, those are good. C and D are yellow, those are, you may need to watch them in the future. And then E and F are bad, you might want to look at some type of mitigation or some type of signal retimings that you could do now for improvement. So same with projecting the traffic volumes. We then looked at those 2045 traffic volumes and how they would operate in the future, how all those intersections would operate. So this is with no improvements done. If everything stayed the same, if the traffic signals continued to operate how they did. So no maintenance, no additional improvements. So I'll flip back and forth so you can see some of the greens turning to yellows, some of the yellows turn to red. The reds just stay red, they don't get darker. So some of the interesting ones to take a look at are the 91 ramps on 220. So you have yellow and green existing, and then you have red, and you're starting to see yellow in the future. And then another interesting one to take a look at is down at, I'll start with existing, so down onto Route 190, you have yellow, full green, full green. In the future, you have, it starts to turn red, but you still maintain your green on 190. So these two intersections are still going to operate in good condition. So when we take a look at mitigation and we're moving into that, we're going to take a look at the intersections that have level of service F, and when we add additional development, that will also change how these intersections operate. The last piece of the existing conditions analysis that we completed was a review of the transit services in the area. We know that the CT Transit bus does service the Enfield Mall. We know that the Enfield Mall has a park and ride. And then we also know that Enfield has a very robust set of transit services that they host themselves with the dial-a-ride, with the magic carpet bus. So we are taking into consideration how any changes to the access could impact those transit services in the future. And with that, I will turn it over to Caitlin to talk about the visual preference survey.
So this was intuitive, so. All right, good evening, everyone. Again, Caitlin Palmer. I'm with the Capital Region Council of Governments, and I'm joined by Chris Henchy. And I'm gonna go ahead and just give you guys a quick recap over the visual preference survey that we did. This was also back in 2021. Maybe many of you participated in that process. The big highlight of that for me was just, again, I believe, Nelson, you already touched on this, just the overwhelming amount of responses that we had, particularly from the Enfield community. Of the nearly 1,200 respondents that we had, 84% of that came from the Enfield community based on the zip codes that you all provided on the survey. And then we had a smattering from some other Connecticut states and even some Connecticut towns and cities, as well as some Massachusetts communities as well. And also we had really great response on our Spanish surveys. Nearly 40 Spanish surveys were also submitted to us as well. We did digital, we did paper copies. So again, just it's not often that I have the privilege of working on a municipal project like this and having such a great response rate, so that's amazing. Just really quickly, I'll read these in case they're hard to read, but we focused this visual preference survey on 7 themes: building density, site layout and parking, building architecture, building heights, residential use, entertainment use, and also bike and pedestrian amenities. And basically what we did as part of this visual preference survey is we asked, based on an image that we're providing to you, do you like it or not? We asked, do you find it very desirable? Is it okay? Or do you find it not desirable? And based on that pretty simple rubric, we kind of were able to glean some information that was going to help us sort of combine with the market study to sort of answer questions about what we might end up wanting to model out for our traffic impact study that we're going to do. I think that's all I'm gonna say. The only thing I'll mention too is we have 7 themes. I'm not going to touch on all of them tonight because not all of them necessarily impact the traffic impact piece. For example, building architecture doesn't really impact the traffic, but it is still useful information for the community to be able to have. Should a developer come in the future as well with interest to make changes, it's always helpful to know what the community wants to maybe save everybody, yourselves included, time and effort and money through that process. So, touching on, I think, 5 out of the 7. First, we have building density. So what we did, these were some of the images we provided, and we basically said, we want you to focus on the relationship of the storefronts and the parking and how vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists and transit, how everything sort of accesses the stores. Is it, parking sort of surrounded by a strip mall sort of development? Is it an outdoor commercial mall, for example? You see that up there. We actually provided 2 examples. We showed, I think it was a Clinton pedestrian mall example, as well as the Evergreen Mall example as well that you see here. And as you can see, the breakdown, I'm sort of highlighting the percentage responses to very desirable and okay. So for example, our outdoor commercial mall rated the best. So 65% of respondents said they thought that was very desirable and 25% thought that was okay. And keep in mind too, for this visual preference survey, as a survey taker, you could say all of these were very desirable. So you didn't have to pick or choose or prioritize. So that was just interesting takeaway for us as well. The standalone retail also, I think pretty notably, did not do very well, especially when you look at that very desirable percentage by itself. Next, we looked at site layout and parking, so how the buildings and the parking areas are oriented to the site. Is your parking, like you see here in that top image, adjacent to the sidewalk, pretty close to the front entrances? Is it behind? Is it in front? Notably for this one, we also showed a parking garage image, and of note, I think my notes will clarify that for me, but I think it was 62% found that to be undesirable, very specific, undesirable on the parking garage. And I will say on that imagery, we did show one that was not very aesthetically pleasing. It was very clearly a parking garage. So should there be development in the future, that isn't to say that maybe something more architecturally sensitive couldn't be done or something wrapped with retail, with housing, because those models do exist. But I will just say that. No ugly parking garages. We heard that loud and clear. Building heights as well, this was interesting to me. Very clearly, we were just asking for people to opine how they felt on the height of buildings. I forget the exact breakdown that we asked people to sort of score on. One story did well, so 95%, this is a combined score of people that felt it was either very desirable or okay. 95% of people responded that way. Three-story building also scored pretty well. 66% of folks felt that that was okay. What's notable about this is that the survey responses, just by looking at the breakdown of like what they chose, suggest one story is the clear winner. But I will say, in looking at the written commentary, because every theme had an option for people at the end to provide written comments, the written commentary definitely suggests 3 to 4 would be acceptable, particularly if it done like a mixed use style format, which we heard a lot about mixed use. Next, we asked about residential use. And you might be wondering, or maybe you're not, maybe you understand exactly where we're going with this. You might be asking, why are we asking about residential use when we're talking about the Enfield Square Mall? Obviously, we're talking about potential redevelopment options. And what we saw with the market survey is that there is definitely market potential for residential use here. Also, the case study research that we did, I did. There we go. I accidentally clicked. The case study research that we saw as well when we were looking at other mall redevelopment types that exist, adding residential uses is not uncommon, and it's definitely a viable use. So we wanted to know from residents and others, what type of residential use would you be interested in? Specifically, we were trying to get people to focus on how you access a building. Do you share space? Do you share doorways? And so that's kind of what this gets at. And notably here, townhomes, particularly townhomes that had individual door entrances that were not shared, rated the best. So 36% of folks found it very desirable, 40% found it okay. And then also notably, the apartment with the shared hallway, sort of the typical apartment, didn't score as well, particularly as far as very desirable. But also of note, this is where we started to ask the mixed use question. We asked it in the residential section, and again, a pretty strong preference. I mean, 38% also found it very desirable, so even more desirable in theory than the townhomes. So again, that suggests that maybe there's a little bit of a mismatch between the building height piece and the actual building form, depending on what that building form takes. So that was very interesting to us as well. And then one of the last slides I have here is on the entertainment use. So again, we asked this question because the market study that Becca's going to touch on next is, it showed that the Enfield community in the market study area has a higher tendency of participating in these activities, in this entertainment use. And I think what the market study said is that this area is going outside the market area and is spending these dollars. So you might be able to capture that, and by putting some sort of regional entertainment destination in Enfield. And so we asked, what are some examples? This is a sort of atypical visual preference survey question to ask, because we're showing you a visual example of a use, but it got the point across. And we asked more than this. We also asked about gyms, indoor water parks, and even a hotel as a sort of amenity entertainment gathering option. Everything scored well. Everything scored above 50% of people finding it, again, very desirable and or okay. So I've highlighted the top 4 though. So brewery, movie theater, indoor golf, all again scored above 80%. So this was just, again, helpful information for the community, a developer in the future, should you go that route. And I think it also is interesting because what we heard, again, all those written in responses, we received over 900 written in comments also as part of the survey, which is, again, fantastic, thank you. But we also heard live, work, play, mixed use, family friendly, more bike friendly or pedestrian friendly. So I won't read these. I think it's big enough that you can read them. But definitely, we heard this a lot through the commentary. And I think that's it for me.
Thanks. So as Nelson and Caitlin have both mentioned, we completed a market study as well as a mall redevelopment trend study. So first, with the market study, what we looked at is what type of development could be supported in this area. So the first piece of it is the market study. So you see Enfield focused here in the center. And then the entire market area was looked at going into Massachusetts and down south of Hartford. So what this was looking at is how much of different types of development could be supported. So it looked at residential, it looked at retail, commercial, industrial, tourism. So tourism, like Caitlin said, really focused on those entertainment uses where people from this area people from Enfield are going outside of Enfield to use these uses. And what they looked at as part of the market study is over the average threshold. So more people than on a standard scale are going outside of the area in Enfield to utilize those uses that you saw in the visual preference survey, which is why we selected those particular ones. So it's something that the developer could potentially utilize to inform some future changes. And so what did that market study say? So that market study told us that this site could support 100, so before I get into the total numbers and read them to you, I do want to say that it would be a phased approach, and these uses are dependent on one another. So not everything all at once, they do go together and are supportive of one another. So it's 150 townhouses, 690 apartments, 150,000 square feet of mixed-use retail. We would look to see this mixed-use retail broken down into smaller, more manageable storefronts. We've seen that be really successful in other metropolitan areas in Connecticut, is looking at the storefront size so that you can bring in a bunch of different uses. 2 different restaurants, but more of the mid-scale, upscale, not ones where you prepay. So that's the definition of what type of restaurants are here. As well as 38,000 square feet of medical office and 65,000 square feet of entertainment. And again, just like the retail, it's not one building that's 65,000 square feet of entertainment. It could be a variety of uses. It could be, that indoor golf simulator and a brewery. So different types of uses, but that's what could be supported. And then as part of this, we also looked at market and mall redevelopment trends. So where across the country, Nelson and Caitlin both mentioned this, have mall redevelopment been successful? What types of uses were there? We looked at malls in Massachusetts, malls in Virginia, to see how that they redeveloped these parcels and were successful doing it. And many of them have these very similar uses, that live, work, learn, play, that everyone is, moving towards. So Nelson mentioned this in the beginning, so access management, this is what we are looking for feedback from you on tonight. That's the boards that you see all around you on the rooms. So what is access management? So I won't read you the FHWA guideline, but in very simple terms, it's how you enter and exit the site. So currently, the Enfield Mall has 4 full access driveways, meaning you can turn left into and out of the mall, and you can turn right into and out of the mall. So what we're looking in terms of access management is ways to reduce or modify those vehicular access points to the adjacent parcels to reduce crashes, to improve the flow of traffic, and to reduce the number of vehicle conflict points. So when you're turning left through an intersection, there is a lot of vehicle conflict points compared to when you turn right. So you just think about how many different ways you're looking for, traffic when you turn left versus when you turn right. So that's what we're looking at, is ways to potentially change the access in the future. I should also state that this is all in the future, potentially, just as solutions for the developer to move forward with. And I think Nelson mentioned this in the beginning, but I do want to stress this again. This is a traffic impact study. It is access management options that are going to be presented to the developer for them to consider. It would still have to go before the town. It would still, because these are state roads, have to go before the state for approvals. We are just looking at seeing what the public would be amenable and what they would be supportive to see in the future. So I will walk through these different access management options, and then at the conclusion of the question and answers, it's going to be an open house style. We will give you these blue dots. Everyone receives 2 blue dots, and we will have staff at each of the 5 boards, and you can walk around and put your blue dots on the different boards that you support. You can put them both on one board, or you can put just, one on each, one on 2 different boards. Please do not rip them in half. Half votes do not count. We're just looking for 2 votes. So ultimately, the town is going to be selecting 2 options in these access management options that we do move forward and analyze. I do want to warn you that when we do move them forward, we are going to give the town 2 implementable access options. So if the 2 that the town pick and select to move forward with don't work, no matter what mitigation we do, that it would just be, out of the realm and out of the context-sensitive design that the community wants to see here, we're going to modify those to give the town 2 different access options that will work, so that when the developer does eventually come forward, there are already approved options.
Excuse me, I don't think you can enter the mall with a left-hand turn on that 4th intersection on 220, the one that's westernmost. That's a no left turn intersection. No,
This one
Where
here,
you come off the highway.
so, but when we'll get into that, so what we're talking about doing is making physical restrictions so you can't do it, not just signage.
Do it.
Well, they do it.
Yes, yeah, we can go back and look at traffic counts. That's the important part, is what we'd be looking at doing is terms of the mitigation is using channelization devices, looking at Freshwater Boulevard, the median treatments that they have, or their northern driveway where they have a channelization where you can you can't turn left in or out. So that's what we're looking into for the future. So I'll start with the existing conditions, explain how it operates, and then go through each of the different options. So the green dot has it is vehicular access. We are not talking about restricting how pedestrians or cyclists traverse the site. That's definitely something the developer wants to encourage and promote as much as possible. So for 220, what we're looking at here on the existing is you have a full vehicular access on both your 220 driveways. On Freshwater Boulevard, you also have your full vehicular access as well as on Route 190. And so what's important to note is when you make potential changes to the driveway access at the mall, you may impact the development across the street from it. And so that's where you'll see some of the colors of dot changes as we move forward. So green again means full vehicular access. Yellow means partial vehicular access, like right in, right out, maybe only a right in, so it's partial. And then the red X is self-explanatory, it means the driveway is closed. So in the existing conditions, you have 4 full access. In option A, the westernmost driveway, this is the driveway that is very close to those 91 off-ramps. That, oftentimes you have queues that back up from this signal past where the ramps are, and people are pulling into traffic even though there's no spaces to make it, and it's a little bit of a hodgepodge there. And so this first option A looks at closing this westernmost driveway, which would then make the driveway across the street a partial vehicular access. The other 3 remain unchanged. Option B looks at the same driveway we're now making changes to, this western driveway, making them both partial access. So for example, right in, right out. The other 3 driveways are unchanged. Option C keeps the same that we had from option B, where you have the partial access on 220 and makes Freshwater Boulevard, that driveway here, also partial access. And then your last option is option D. So this is similar to what we had previously, where we closed the westernmost driveway. It will make the one across from it partial access. And we are introducing a new driveway. So this is near where the jewelry store is. We'd be introducing a new connection into the mall as a partial access only. So those are the options that we want your input in.
Good to me.
We will be handing out, I'll explain this right now. So we'll be handing out 2 blue dots to everyone. We'll have staff either from CDM Smith or from CROG at each of the boards. If you have specific questions, we can answer them. If you need something explained in a little greater detail, we can explain it there. And we'll ask that you do select your preferred options for the access. And then the staff member will also have sticky notes. So if there's any specific observations that you would like to provide or any other feedback that you'd like to provide, we can write them down, especially if it's specific to an intersection, and then we can stick it on the board. And as you walk around the room, you'll see feedback from each other. And a lot of times when you see what somebody else wrote, you can be like, oh yeah, I have that same problem. So it really helps like jog your memory, maybe something that you wouldn't think about. So before we go into the questions and answers, we're just going to talk about what the next steps are. So we mentioned as we went through this, we completed the existing conditions in the future no-build analysis, so that 2045 analysis. We completed the market analysis as well as the visual preference survey. We're here today at the first public information meeting. Our next steps are going to be selecting the 2 preferred options, access options that will move forward. So the goal is that we will move 2 access options forward plus the existing conditions for a total of 3. And then we will complete the traffic analysis from no build, so without the mall redevelopment, on those new access options, and then with the traffic from the mall redevelopment. So the traffic that's going to be analyzed is what you saw, that max build out from the market analysis. So the 150 townhouses, the 690 apartments, the 150,000 square feet of retail, that whole list that you saw earlier. And then after we complete that future build analysis, we will complete and finalize the traffic impact study and present it back to hopefully this whole group in the fall of next year.
If I can, just one question for you. I think you hit upon it earlier tonight, so maybe you can emphasize it again.
Yeah.
Based on the figures you started to use and what you're going to use going forward in the future, whether you're aware or not aware, there are going to be additional developments going along 190 and 220 within this corridor within the next year or 2. So are you aware of that, or are you going to be made aware of that as you continue to build this study?
So the town has made us aware of any developments that have come before them that are going on in this corridor, and that was, brought into the model. And then the state is also involved into this study, and so any projects, any large land use changes, large parking lot expansions do have to go before the Office of State Traffic Administration, so they will give us their information and have.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you'll be kept in the loop on all this as we build out the next.
Anything significant that has to go through OSTA,
Yeah.
we'll be informed of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So take it one step farther, how far out do you go? Because the new warehouse just has opened up on Moody Road, and it's just truck traffic coming out of there. And it's usually heading towards 91.
So if their traffic study deemed that significant traffic was added to our study area intersections, we can pull their numbers. So it will really be up to how far we go is deemed onto is how far did that traffic study go for the, that development.
I didn't know if they did one.
It didn't go that far.
It's up to 100 trucks a day.
Yeah, so if they didn't do it, we, that's,
It didn't go all the way down to.
yeah, if it didn't go downtown, that's, yeah.
Maybe somewhere in your conversation you covered this, but I never heard who's gonna pay for what.
Well, this study's being sponsored by Capital Regional Council of Governments. The town had a small match in the overall study, but it was
When you
subsidized
say small,
10%.
10%, and if we're talking, $100 million,
No, it's a-
that's 10 million.
No, it was a $200,000 study.
We have to be aware of that, because whatever we do, our taxes are gonna be paid in to take care of it. So, not only that, but when you talk about state or some of these other agencies, we pay them too. So that's our money. So we're very critical when you start talking about total cost and what do the people that own the mall now get? Are they gonna get a great big profit that we're gonna have to come up with?
They get the results of this study, sir.
Okay, one thing, and this concerns the town. When you have a meeting in this room, they need to change the sound system. They need to have if the speaker's always gonna be on that end, they need to have a mic hanging down from the ceiling. Because back here, I could only hear about 10%.
Understood. We'll take that to advisement. We'll let IT
Okay.
know.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I mean, I would hate to miss something. The ladies are very knowledgeable and very good presenters, but they have small, beautiful voices. And it's hard to hear.
Thank you. Doesn't matter.
Okay, so, good evening. Thank you for coming, all of you, I appreciate that. It seems like a pretty decent study you got going here, but the question I have for you is developing the mall. Okay, now, you know, we pick out entrances, we pick out this, that, there are possible choices for that development. What if the developer comes in there and says, no, I don't want to do this after you, or whatever we chose as a town, said, we want these. He goes, I'm gonna build, you know, townhouses, I'm gonna put in a store, I'm gonna put in a brewery, I'm gonna do this, bowling alley, whatever they do. What if they say, no, this is not the way I want to see my entrances come into my property that I'm developing for this town in this area? I mean, does this all go out the window type of thing, or, you know what I'm saying, is that, what if it's not agreeable? That's the biggest thing, is this happens a lot, that we don't get agreeable on a lot of people developing this town. And especially the local people who live in that area are affected majority-wise. The traffic is terrible. And people who live in this area don't want to see more. That's why the casino was turned down by this town some years back. And that's one of the major reasons, was the additional traffic. But I just don't know if, you know, town or the state goes through all this, and next thing you know, the developer says, no, thank you, that's not what I want. You want me here? This is the way we're gonna do it my way.
Well, if anything, I mean, this study's gonna provide, it's a tool, it's a guidance document for the future analysis, the future traffic build out of this site. How a developer imposes his development plan on the site, subject to local planning and zoning commission approval, and then the entrances and exits are subject to local zoning regulations. The state DOT ultimately gets involved in a final design. Again, this is gonna provide guidance on a global conceptual plan on where we feel the best routes are based on a traffic study of where the entrances should be, or if there's a right in and right out, or the removal of an entrance. What we recommend as part of the study is gonna be used as guidance for the future stuff, for any future owner of the mall or any future developer.
Thank you.
So, but I'm looking at existing entrances and exit ramps, exit areas. What if you got rid of them all and started all over and you just made them in a different place? Because going down your road, the casino idea was to actually put in a flyover road directly into the mall. That was one of the options when it was discussed. So are we focused only on those 4 entrance and exits? Or is there the opposite one where I see you put a yellow dot at the gem jewelry or whatever that is? That one scares me more, that's another subject, but what, can we add something? Or is this what we're supposed to focus on?
No, tonight's public input on all 4 options. We can tweak any option based on any public input we get tonight.
Right, but
So
it's
we're
not
not-
for us to go over there and stick one right in the middle of that wetland area, I'm just making something up.
We'll take any comments under advisement tonight.
Quick question. And I assume I know the answer, but the pedestrians that you were showing walking to the area and the cyclists, where are they coming from?
It's likely, I went there thinking the study area is there, but it's likely the residences and the Thompsonville area. And
Thompsonville.
we hope that there's more from Thompsonville with the train station. So we foresee more pedestrians and cyclists.
So we expect more from Thompsonville in the way of pedestrians and also cyclists
Yes.
as well.
And you have the college there, that supplies a lot of students that walk up and down that area too.
Yep.
Are we gonna be able to talk about that after we do this exercise? Or do you wanna talk about the pedestrian issues on 220 now, or would you like to wait till later?
I think, so we
Because
want
I
to
think
get
we've had this
all of your,
conversation
yeah, so we want to get all of your questions and answers now, because I
Okay.
do envision with the open house, people are going to leave as they're
Sure.
done, so any questions should come now.
So,
I don't,
oh, okay. So, can we discuss because you kind of touched upon it, and we've had this conversation before about the pedestrian and bike, I lumped it all together on 220. As you know, the lights aren't timed, you talk about the tunnel under 91, which is very difficult to repair, there's the crosswalks are missing, handicap, the rubber ramps are missing, so really it's a pedestrian bike nightmare. I wanna say, from Shaker and Elm all the way down to 91. It gets a little bit better once you get past under 91 and get towards Moore
Yep.
Thompsonville. So I noticed this study isn't directly discussing that. Is that something we can discuss with you later on as an add-on to this, or can we add that to this, the pedestrian improvements that need to be made or recommendations?
The pedestrian activity is gonna be assessed as part of the traffic study.
Yeah, so we're going to include recommendations for whichever development comes in, that there is bike lanes, there's sidewalks throughout. We'll, including the transit options, making sure there's still stops with covered bus stops throughout the development. That's definitely a key focus of this area. It's a key focus of development, anywhere. And I'd encourage any developments that come in your area, always making sure pedestrian and cyclists are accommodated. That's.
I think I didn't want to lose sight, because that really is.
I do have, and I'll share it with Nelson just because I love going on vacation and taking pictures of areas where they've just done something really cool and unique. And there's a picture of an overpass very much like this one in Atlanta where they've put their belt line and it's all paint. And I have a picture because I was walking on it behind a gentleman with his son cycling. And it's painted and it's lit and it's still narrow. It's, they didn't do any physical improvements. They just added some lighting and paint and it just completely transformed the way you feel through it.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that point, that was a great point, Lou. You mentioned that those results would go down to the developers, but these are state roads. So just to validate, those are gonna go back up to the state as well, right? Because those are not
Yeah.
dependent, those things are not dependent on private development. There's no dependency to improve pedestrian or bicycle
No.
infrastructure.
That's why I brought, to me, the 220 pedestrian issue is really a step, and that's not just this issue, it's a safety issue, period. Whether we do any development around a mall or whatever happens there, that needs to be addressed. Maybe we can pick this up tomorrow night, 'cause I think you're coming tomorrow.
We are coming
Yes.
tomorrow. I'll be back.
We'll pick it up tomorrow night.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That's a now.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, we live on the last full residential block on Elm Street, the one Enfield and the entrance off the highway,
Okay.
that block. The last 10 years, the traffic has been getting worse and worse. I can't get out of my own driveway half the time. At one point, they had talked about widening that last block to 4 lanes. It was thrown around town. People that live here were talking about it a lot because it gets so congested up there where all the retail is. All those 4 lanes are all trying to fit in the 2 lanes to get down to Enfield Street. I've seen more accidents happen at that area trying to get into the 2 lanes. I was wondering if any of that input was put into this study. How the traffic is flowing into those 2 lanes.
Talking about the heading west underneath the 91 underpass from.
Yeah, and down to.
Yeah, that's a critical intersection. I think it's gonna be assessed.
It's the 91 intersections, but you're talking about
What
going.
happens is the 4
Yeah,
lanes
it's-
come into 2 lanes,
Yeah.
and that's where you get a lot of the trouble.
The top
You're
is
talking
not too
about
wide.
here.
Right.
Yeah, so this area is not included in the study,
No,
but
because
this intersection is, and it does have a high crash
if you bring
rate.
a bunch of retail or entertainment or whatever, the traffic's only gonna get more or worse, which we want. We want people to come to our town, which I don't think we have enough things for people to come to. But at the same time, I live on that block and I can't get out of my driveway now. So I really think that from Enfield Street to where the mall is should be studied as well as part of this, because we're the residential section trying to get either to work or to wherever we wanna go, and we can't even get out of our driveways. At this point, what's gonna happen if you develop more?
Understood. We'll definitely look into that. So you're talking about those 3 or 4 intersections, the side streets that come down Enfield, Elm Street as you approach Enfield Street.
Yeah, well,
Especially particularly right to the west of
right
91.
where the underpass
Yes.
is, because you come out of 4 lanes right into 2 lanes.
Correct.
And everybody's trying to squeeze in at the same time. Also, that light where Friendly's is, has that do not take a left turn into the mall,
Yes.
and everybody does it. I sit there at the light and watch them.
No.
So I don't know how you're gonna correct that.
That sign is only as big as this piece of paper.
Yeah, true. But I've seen a lot of near accidents from it. So I'm concerned about that because I live there.
Understood.
That's my concern.
Well, first of all, thank you for your time and your effort, your presentation. I think it's excellent. Could you explain again to everybody in regard to your partial access options? Now, what do you want from us? Do you want us to give you input? Do you think we should take a right, or are we gonna exit out, we gonna exit in?
We want feedback on, do you like option A better, or B better, or C, or D? Just purely which ones do you want? So, do you not want this driveway closed? Is this a driveway that you use all the time, or you see people using and you don't want it closed? Then you pick one of the other options, or maybe, like you said, you're not supposed to be taking your left turn, so maybe we do something more constructed with medians and with channelization islands where it's a partial access and it truly is right in, right out. So we just high level want your opinion on which you like best.
Okay, so then you would come back to us and say, this would be the best option, right in, right out, exit in.
We'll come
Or enter
back
in.
to you in a perfect world and say the ones that you selected work with the new development. This is the
Okay.
mitigation that needs to
All right.
occur, which can be something as easy potentially as signal timings along the corridor.
Okay, great, thank you.
Two things. First is, we should select an option or consider an option that makes the most money for the town. Because after all, we'd like to lower our taxes. So if it's a walking mall that doesn't generate profit, what good is that? If it's one that does nothing but generate profit, but is a high cost in police and fire and everything else, then that's not so good for us. Second thing that I'd like to bring up is there's been studies done before about some of the traffic around here. One of the things they never consider, whenever there's an accident in 91, all that traffic comes off and we are inundated with traffic. Also, a lot of Massachusetts people use our town for a shortcut up to Massachusetts, up to the Long Meadow area, and our roads are loaded. So that needs to be brought into the formula as to what kind of turn you're gonna make, what are you gonna use it for, cost, all of that. I didn't see any of that here.
So our traffic volumes that we counted in May in 2021 do take into consideration all the traffic, however, wherever they're
Yes,
using and coming from.
that was a
the city.
very good one that you did
Yeah.
on the accidents.
Yeah.
Because that is critical, because it really throws everything into bad use. They wanted to cut our road right out here down to 3 lanes. They said, well, we never saw an accident. Tell you what, have an accident out there and come down here and look. You'll see what happens. So, other studies didn't even consider that. We need to consider it.
Thank you for the comments.
Thank you.
Couple questions. So you're looking to our opinion on access to the mall itself, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I've only been a resident in Enfield for 2 years. I don't see a lot of traffic going into the mall. Take away Target, there's no reason to go there except to walk. It's everything else around it.
So
Could
that
be.
is, let me just answer that and then I'll come back to you for your second question. So we do talk about both sides of these entrances. So if we change one, you change the other. So that could be where some of your questions come in. We've heard a lot about the Costco at that Freshwater Boulevard, so I expect some comments there.
All right. Second one, to your proposed, I was a 40-year resident of South Windsor. They put in Evergreen, they put in Cisco, they put in a lot of things. I never saw my taxes go down.
Well,
It
that's
was
good.
nice to have.
Had more money to spend, that's why.
Thank you.
1952, my father had a vegetable stand. I carried it on until they called the mall walkers, start walking up the street. And it was one of those, honor systems. You put the money in the jar and you take the vegetables. My wife and I went to a powwow. We came back and the stand was clean. My wife said, "Oh my God." She says, "We must have made a fortune." I opened it up, it was 13 cents in there. So apartments, I'm not for. Those townhouses, I'm not for. Retail, yes. They pay taxes. They help the town. They help the residents. You gotta get more businesses to come in. I was gonna go up to New Hampshire myself and get LL Bean to come down here and look at this, to get in here. We need businesses. We don't need apartments. And what's gonna happen is the low income people are gonna get in there, and that's it. You forget it. You get them in there, it becomes another Hartford.
I'll address at least part of that comment, and you won't get the retail unless you have more residents. And you need some manner of density to get the retail that will
We
still
got
even
a lot of
support.
residents in this town, and I'm
It's
sorry
been
to
decreasing,
say,
sir.
we have a lot. Because this was the bed town of Hartford.
The key was.
Ledger Star made all those homes,
The key
and
word
there's
was.
plenty of people here.
And
We
the-
need
sorry.
businesses, not apartments, not townhouses.
We need a tax base.
We need a real tax base.
Yeah, and I mean, there are property owners and developers that do build the bigger density units. I mean, like, they are gonna be good taxpayers as well. I'll also say too, on the market study, I don't think it was highlighted, but, or maybe it was, or maybe it's just my notes. But, the survey was agnostic, so you can have townhomes that are rental, you can also have a condo ownership situation as well. So it doesn't
Well,
specify, it's just a
they got a
format.
project going on down here for low income, along the river. They're gonna do low income down there. They're gonna do low income. What do you mean?
So
low
the
income?
purpose tonight's meeting is to discuss this traffic study and the impacts, any proposed market study on this overall development, discussing the 15 intersections around the mall. It's not really discuss businesses.
Well, the town's always trying to get Enfield back online. The town hall. You get all these decorations, there's nothing going on. Here, the only way you're gonna get this town back to alive is put that bridge back. And then they'll have to come across through the town. It's silly. All this money they spend on decorations for the center of town. Big deal. It just, utilizing,
You do realize that Enfield was 5 towns. That's why we have 5 fire departments where we only need 1.
But we're here to discuss the traffic around the mall, are we not?
Yes, we
Because
are,
we're
yeah.
getting some side issues here.
Exactly, we
They're
are.
good issues,
So.
but not for
I have
tonight.
a question. Which one of these is the original way it is right now?
Existing condition right over there, sir.
Which one?
That one.
So
Existing.
you can vote on this one.
Because you don't have a left-hand turn change on the.
We did it how people drive it. How it is utilized.
Even though it's illegal, right? We're still gonna count that as how
Based
many
on the
drive.
traffic study.
It's based on the volumes, it's
that's
utilized,
the one I
based on
wanted
what
to find
people
out.
have said, it's utilized, what they experience, it's utilized. I think this gentleman in the blue had a comment.
Yeah, I'll stick to the traffic. I was gonna address this gentleman's housing, but instead, I've been riding my bike in this town since my parents gave me one in 1965. And a couple observations about the mall area. It's completely designed without pedestrians and bicyclists in mind, and it's really kind of extraordinarily dangerous. I mean, there's a lot of simple things that are missing. Like you take from Panera, that plaza, and you try crossing to the mall, and I see people do that. I've seen them. I even saw a woman cross with her baby carriage once. There's no crosswalks there to begin with. There is oddly a traffic signal, But on the mall side, the pole is in the dirt. It's like set maybe 10, 15 feet back from the road. It's ridiculous. There's no sidewalk on the left-hand side on Freshwater, or the western side. And generally throughout this entire area, there's no rhyme or reason to pedestrian safety at all. It's a hodgepodge of really insufficient traffic lights. Like they're not even, don't cross, they're just these buttons you press and wait for the sound, and then you boldly cross 8 lanes. Whatever you do, if you want to get, if you want to make Thompsonville vital, you need to figure out a way to create a nice, easy, safe path for people to bike from Thompsonville to that. But you also, Southwood Acres, where I live, it's extraordinarily flat, and it's a very easy bike ride, and it's in some ways an easy walk, really, to the whole mall area. And it's not safe to do. It's dangerous. Because just a lot of very simple things are missing. And so I really hope you give that a lot of attention when you put this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to take one more comment and then we are going to break for the open house. So we will all be around so you can come ask us questions and vote for your stickers or with your stickers. Chris is passing them out now.
What, I don't get any?
Do we have a bunch of cell phone comments? Yeah. All right, so we'll take these two in person and then we'll take one of the cell phone ones that came in.
Yes, sir.
Pick what board you want.
You guys did a market study, I don't know, 100.
Only exactly. Oh, you want us to stick them on?
650
Yeah,
apartments.
all those.
Okay, is there, is there,
What option do you like?
that's the market,
For
like,
entrances.
is there like a limit? Do you define a limit to what the site can handle in terms of traffic?
Excuse me,
Yeah, excuse,
please, we can't hear. Thank you.
you guys got my question?
Yes. Like there's a limit in terms of the market study on the full build out. What can the mall hold in terms of capacity?
Like, what will the roads handle, like,
Oh, okay.
forget about the mitigation study, no, this is the limit,
So we haven't figured out what the roads can handle. We're going to figure that out when we do this next step. That's what this next step is going to tell us, how much we can mitigate, what type of improvements are needed. And it may be where we say, you can't build all of this. So we haven't tested that yet.
There's a market demand and then there's the ability for the roadways based on, a certain amount of improvements, economically feasible improvements that the roadways network can handle. And that's when we're gonna determine how much, in terms of development, can you build in regards to versus the significant amount of improvements that need to be done to the roadway system.
Thanks.
Last question?
Yeah, I don't know if this was a pipe dream or I saw this in a planning document somewhere, but there was once a thought about having like a freshwater brook greenway trail, right, comes from the pond in Thompsonville, but we'd also cross the highway and actually enter the mall area, if you look where Freshwater Brook is, because that's the low point of the highway. It'd be an easy way to bridge that and connect into the rest of this whole area. So I don't know if that was looked at all. That was, I swear that was in a planning document I saw once upon a time on the town website.
We've been communicating with the owner of the property. They're very aware of the town's desire to not only have improved bike and ped facilities, but also to have an off-road multi-use trail.
That would connect right into Thompsonville.
They're very aware of that. That came out loud and clear from our visual preference survey results, both the results, just multiple choice, and then what was written in.
Just a quick response. That project was called the Connecticut River Access Project.
Yes.
Okay, which was gonna be starting from the mall, going across 91, down into Freshwater,
All the way to the
all the way down into the boat launch area.
Yes. Okay, I didn't dream that, okay.
Yeah, and that project got squashed a few years back.
It's still on the shelf, we bring it back.
There is a bike path that is proposed that will be on Enfield Street up to the Suffield Canal.
Great.
So we did provide people with the opportunity to comment via text, and we have received a few of them. So I will read the comment aloud so you can hear it, and then we'll provide the response. So the first one is, have any considerations been taken regarding sequencing the traffic lights on Route 190 and Route 220? On 190 specifically, it seems like I get stuck at every red light going eastbound. So as part of the mitigation, the very first step and the lowest hanging fruit for us is going to be coordinating those traffic signals on both roadways. So I would fully expect to be standing here next fall telling you we did that.
Put them all green at the same time, then put them all red at the other same time.
See, I'm with you.
That's it, make them green, that's the way everybody goes.
It works well, if
Talk
you
to those
do it
guys.
at a certain speed limit,
Yeah.
it works well.
And so this next question is, was your site visit in October 21 impacted by the fact that COVID was still in place and there may have been less people and less movement on the roads at that point? So when we completed the traffic volumes, we actually counted those in May of 2021. They were provided to the Connecticut Department of Transportation's planning unit. They track the growth and where traffic volumes are over across the state of Connecticut. So they made any adjustments that they believed were necessary in order to reach the non-COVID or pre-COVID levels, as we refer to them. So we're comfortable, and the state is comfortable with the traffic volumes that were utilized. And in terms of pedestrians and cyclists, we saw a good number of pedestrians and cyclists out on 220. So I think that maybe it just encouraged more to be out there. That's it. All right, so thank you all for joining us. So this is going to be the open house portion. As we've explained, you have your blue dots now. There are two. You can put them on the same access option. Existing conditions is an option, so if you want it to remain the same, put your two blue dots there, or you can divide them. Thank you for attending.